Oops. Shalom Aleichem to whoever's watching. If anybody is watching, I'm not sure. I think I might be the only one here. I'm for sure the only one here physically in the whole building because Leah, who normally teaches in the other room, gave birth a week ago, and they had the baby had the bris on Shabbos. Or, what's the baby's name? Ori Chaim, something like that. Menachem Mendel. But the Menachem Mendel part I remember. So, everyone should have a refuah shlema. Bezrat Hashem. And tonight is Reb Shalom's yard site. And what a special schut, a special honor to be giving the class on his yard site. Especially because this is the class that I actually thought that I had asked Shalom to let me give this class in his house, but it turns out that he asked me to give the class in his house because I was looking over the Reb Shalom book, and in it I saw this story where Shalom asked me to give a class in Likutey Moharan, and I said to him no, and then 6 months later I came back and I said, okay, now I'm ready to give the class, and he said, okay, give it in Mayanot. And I said, what do you mean? You told me to give the class here. He said, yeah, but we don't have any slots open. Go to Mayanot. And so I started giving the class there. The rest is history. So it's 8 years since Shalom passed away, so I've been giving this class for more than 8 years now. And maybe somebody will show up. I actually don't mind. I was kind of looking forward to giving a class with no one watching and no one physically here, because am I giving this class for my own ego, or am I giving this class because I'm giving the class? And I'm giving the class to give the class. If you see me looking over here, it's because there's a motion sensor light, and it keeps being triggered by, I think, the branches outside, but when somebody walks in the door, the motion light goes on, so I'm kind of seeing if somebody walks in. I did forget to say Shalom Aleichem to everyone that watches, to my mother, of course, and to Katie, and to Avital, and to David, and I'm not sure who else watches, but whoever watches, Shalom Aleichem to you. And we're going to start the lesson. So we started last week, Ayin Daled, 74, and we're going to now work our way into it. It starts off with, I know I started it last week, but I'm going to read it very quickly here. Rabbeinu Zalman Patech Pasuk. Rabbi Nachman opens with the verse in Tehillim, Ruma al Hashemayim Elokim an kol haaretz kavodecha. Hashem exalted himself above the heavens, raised himself up above the heavens, al kol haaretz kavodecha, and his glory is spread over the entire earth. And of course, we've spoken about glory, meaning Hashem's light is spread all over the earth. Ubesuf Torah, give eret ne'emaz bepasuk zeh. My apologies for yawning. Next door, my neighbor started renovating. He tore off the roof He's tearing off the roof, and normally I take a 20-minute nap. That's really all I need these days. 20-minute nap at home, but I couldn't take a nap today, so I'm kind of a little tired. Okay. יבאר על ידי יגיעת התורה יכול לרפא את נפשו מהתרחקותה ויבאר את שורש סוגי הייסורים. This is a really important lesson. Anybody who merits to learn this lesson, it will probably help you in life in general. For sure helped me. So he says he's going to explain that through toiling and learning Torah and understanding Torah, a person can heal their soul from the distance to Hashem. And then he's going to explain the root of the types of afflictions and suffering that we suffer. Hine al kol adam tzarich lerapot nafsho. Every person has to heal their soul. Shenitrachaka mechatav meHashem yitbarach. That was distance from Hashem through their transgressions. But achen yesh lo yisurim, and so that's why the person is suffering, has afflictions. V'afinu im rak yisurim shel ahava. And even if they're afflictions of love, and I mentioned last week that in the Gemara, they define afflictions of love, meaning the kind afflictions in a sense. What is anything that you are afflicted by, but you can still daven. But if you get to the point where you can't daven, like God forbid, you're in a bed in a hospital and you can't daven because you're so weak, that's yisurim shen emet. That's true afflictions. But everything else are afflictions that are essentially there in order to help us grow. That's why we have the afflictions in the first place. Gam kein tzarich lerapeh et nefesh mehem. And you also have to heal your soul from the afflictions that come from a place of love. Dehainu la'alota lemakor shorsha. That is to elevate those afflictions to the place of its root. Perush, meaning tzarich ha'adam la'alot et nafsho lesfirat ha'chochma. Person, so we're down here on Sfirat HaMalchut. I really should remember to put the chart back in here. The lower of the Sfirot, and Chochma is already going up higher, and Chochma, of course, is wisdom. So we have to go from the Naaseh to the Nishma. We have to go from the doing to the understanding. And basically what he's saying is that when you understand that Hashem is running the world in a way that even though to you it might seem like suffering, it's not actually suffering, it's a way of bringing you closer to Hashem. If you know that, if you bring that to the level of Chochmah, to the sphere of Chochmah, of wisdom, then you won't be knocked down by the afflictions, but rather you will get up and you will be strengthened by them. Shehi shoash hamakor shel kol haneshamot. The root of all the souls comes from the root of Chochmah. And that's because when a person impregnates a woman, when a man impregnates a woman, it comes from the brain. How does a person elevate their afflictions? So first we have to understand there's two types of judgments. The first, din shel hatuma, the judgment of the tuma, which means impurity, but it means the transgression. What a sage's blessed memory said, Nachash etin zuhama bechava. That's, I'll just read it here. The serpent placed pollution into Chava, b'sha'at hachet, in the time that she and Adam ate from the tree of good and bad, the tree of knowledge. She'achlu Adam v'Chava me'etz hadat v'azuma zo b'chinat tuma. And what is this pollution? It's an aspect of impurity. Shehitil ba'yetzera, that the nachash, the serpent, brought into the world the evil inclination. V'atuma ib'chinat gvurot v'dinim tme'im. And tuma, which is impurity, is an aspect of stringencies and judgments coming from an impure place. Hanimshachim beishtalshalut achar ishtalshalut me'adinim ba'agvot v'kadoshim shebaolamot ha'elyonim. So up in the supernal worlds, this negative energy, and I'll say in quotes, negative energy, is coming down, but really in the highest place, it's only good. And it's kind of, in a sense, light coming from a very high source. For example, the moon, when there's no city lights, I'm pointing because it was three quarters of a moon up there. The light from the moon comes down, but the light next to the moon is very bright. Of course, it's the light of the sun being reflected off of the moon. But when you get down here, the light from the moon is not very bright. It's very small. So the light that comes from up above is very bright, but by the time it comes down here, we barely see it at all. And then there's Dina Kadisha, Din Kadosh. There's a holy judgment. As it's written in Mishlei, Asher Yahav Hashem Yochiach. Those that Hashem loves, He rebukes. And these are the afflictions of love that come to a person. And these come down from the high supernal lights in the highest places. So your troubles and afflictions are coming from high places, except of course when you're being afflicted because you did a transgression. So a person that outright transgresses, they steal, they eat treif, they don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep Yom Kippur, whatever it is, then any suffering that you're suffering is coming from transgressions. But let's say, for the most part, a person follows these rules as best they can, and they still suffer. So you would say, well, why am I suffering? Because I'm doing everything Hashem asked me. You're suffering because Hashem is giving you suffering in order to bring you closer. But if you don't know that, then you just suffer from the suffering. But if you know that, then you can strengthen yourself and you can overcome it, and that's what brings you closer to Hashem. And the only way that you can do that is by Yigiyat Torah, is by going deeper in learning Torah, meaning Torah is Hashem revealing Himself in this world in the most open way. And so the more you get to know Hashem through toiling through Torah, the more you will understand Hashem in your life. And that's how the whole circle works. So now he's going to go deeper into this idea. This is where we left off last week. And the reason that we find afflictions of love are Ki atchalat itkarvut hi itrachakut. The beginning of coming close is first pushing away or distancing. This is brought in Tinyana in Torah Memchet ve'bi'er beparparot ha'chochma al shas. Parparot ha'chochma is a commentator, Avraham Mechirtzin or something like that. And here he wrote a commentary on Shas and brings in the Likutey Moharan, I guess. המבואר בדבריו ז"ל בכמה מקומות שלפעמים, as it said in his, I guess, the words of Rabbi Nachman of blessed memory, in several places, that sometimes התרחקות הוא תכלית התקרבות וכו'. Sometimes the distancing, the ultimate purpose of the distancing is to bring a person close. Shalom Aleichem. Koach.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. I'll summarize where we are, that Hashem sends us afflictions. There's two types of afflictions. There's afflictions that we get from transgressions, and there's afflictions that we get from love, Hashem's love. And a person could say, well, I do most of the mitzvot as best I can, so why is Hashem punishing me? And Hashem is punishing you. He's not punishing you. He's causing afflictions to you, but it feels to us like it's punishment in order to bring you closer. But you can only know that, or you can only come closer if you know that. If you don't know that, then you're just going to suffer and not feel like there's any purpose for it. And so then he says that right here, what I just read, שלפעמים התרחקות הוא התכלית התקרבות. distancing is, the purpose of the distancing is to bring a person close. Sometimes. V'zeu, she'amar b'midrash b'parashat Yitro, as it says in the midrash in the parasha of Yitro, ani hu she'ani mekarev, ani hu she'ani merachek. Hashem is the one that brings us close, and Hashem is the one that brings us far away. Hainu, that is to say, shegam itrachaka, he gam ken mimeni. When you're being distanced from Hashem, it's also coming from Hashem. Uba atzma milubash gam ken elukuto yitbarach. And in the distancing itself is enclosed Hashem himself. Ki gam itrachaka hi rak bishvil itkarvut. Because the distancing is only to bring you closer. V'devar zeh lamad b'midrash. Okay, so then it says, it brings the quote again. So that's the important thing to remember, that a person thinks that they're suffering from afflictions. And what's the definition of true afflictions and afflictions of love? When a person is not able to daven. Not that they, I guess maybe also they don't have the motivation to daven, but when they're physically not able to daven, that's true Yisurim, and everything else are Yisurim shel Ahava, are Yisurim from afflictions from Hashem in order to bring us closer. שהייסורים הללו נראים כאילו השם מרחיק את האדם מעבודתו ואינו חפץ בה. When we have these afflictions, it seems to us that it's as if Hashem were distancing this person from serving him and does not desire this person's service. הרי על ידי התבוננות בייסורים והמידה כנגד מידה שבאו עליו, because if a person meditates on, looks deeply into the afflictions and looks at measure for the afflictions that came to that person, nitan negalot ki hem itkarvut gadola la'avodat Hashem. A person can learn that this is really bringing a person very close to Hashem. So I was thinking now of somebody who used to live here in the neighborhood. Beverly was her name. One of the old American immigrants in this neighborhood who lived in a bit of a dump. I guess she got it for Tamei Mafteach, for $20,000 in 1980. And so anyhow, she was married, they had some kid, they got divorced, and she got sick, and eventually she died. And I remember when she was sick and seeing her walking around the neighborhood, and it was really fascinating to see whenever somebody, I've seen this quite a few times, whenever somebody is in their last weeks in this world, they're disconnected from the world. They're not worried about their dental appointment. They're not worried about paying the electric bill. They're not worried about all the things that everybody else is worried about. They're not worried about anything. They're kind of half here and half there. And in a sense, that's the closest that we can get to Hashem in this world. Now we can get there by being healthy as well. But a person could look at their situation and say, what good is coming out of these last 3 weeks that I'm here on earth? It is the opportunity to be completely with Hashem while you're still physically in a body. And I'm sure there's other things to it, but that's just an example. The sage of blessed memory said in Ta'anit Daf Chet, Ki hamatztik et atzmo melamata, matztikim alav et adin melamala. A person that justifies themselves down here below, they justify the judgment against the person up above. Perush, the meaning is, she'adam rotzeh la'atztik et atzmo u'li'itkarev la'Hashem yitbarach. When a person wants to, I'm not sure if it's to justify themselves or to become a tzaddik, to become like on a higher level and to come close to Hashem. Matztikim alav et adim. I'm not really clear about what this means. It could mean that they make the judgment righteous, or they judge the person on the level of a tzaddik. V'nimshechim alav dinim ve'yisurim. And then what's drawn down to the person are judgments and afflictions. V'adinim ve'yisurim halalu. And these judgments and afflictions, af shehim nirim ke hitrachakut, even though it appears that they are distancing a person, כאילו רוצים להרחיק אותו מעבודת השם. It's as if they want to distance a person from serving Hashem. יתברך, חס ושלום, God forbid. באמת, התרחקות הוא, הזו היא עיקר התקרבות. The truth is that this distancing, its main purpose is to bring a person closer. כי הדינים והתרחקות הללו הם לטובתו, because the judgments and the distancing are for a person's benefit. כדי שיעמוד בניסיון ויתגבר ויתאמץ ולהתקרב יותר. In order for a person to stand up, to hold on, to hold out in the test that they're going through, to overcome the test, to make the effort, and then to come closer to Hashem. Which makes sense. It's kind of every movie. That's the story of the character. They start off, they're challenged, they overcome the challenge, they grow. And that's in essence what Hashem is doing. Hashem is giving us all of these afflictions in order for us to grow. And it's how you deal with them which takes work. And the work is what brings you closer to Hashem. And then Hashem will show the person what they have to fix. And that's why this judgment is called a holy judgment. Shehu ulam me'idach hu b'chinat mochin dekatnut. That is, however, I'm not sure if I understand the meaning of that, is the idea of having a constricted consciousness. So the other way of looking at it would be to have a constricted consciousness. Shemisham ikar achizat adin kiyadua, because that's where the holding on of the judgment comes from. Meaning that if a person were to have an expanded consciousness, not the katnut, but the gadlut, of seeing Hashem in the whole picture, their suffering would still be suffering, but their meaning behind the suffering would be different. And that's based on what you're able to perceive. That's the level of da'at. Yavi gimel psukim, now he's going to bring 3 verses, shebehem mevar'ar mahutam shel ha'yisurim shel ha'ava. That within them is explained the essence of the afflictions from a place of love. V'hu adin kadosh, and this is the holy judgment, as we mentioned before. B'bchinat yisurim shel ha'ava. That is the afflictions of love. U'b'chinat k'tuv, as written in Bereshit, Avraham holid et Yitzchak. Avraham birthed Yitzchak. He didn't give birth to him, but he fathered, I guess you could say, Yitzchak. We know that Avraham is chesed, and Yitzchak is gevura. Chesed is kindness, gevura is stringency. Ki Avraham hu chesed, because Avraham is kindness, is chesed. V'Yitzchak hu gevura. And Yitzchak is strictness, as it's written, Pachad Yitzchak, the dread of Yitzchak. V'hainu she'adin kadosh, that is the holy judgment, which is Yisurim shel ha'ava, which are afflictions that come from a place of love. U'b'chinat Yitzchak, it's coming from an aspect of Yitzchak. Nolad v'nimshach me'Avraham, which was born and stems from Avraham. Shehu b'chinat chesed, which is kindness. You understand what he's saying here? He's saying that the stringency is in essence kindness. Ki be'emet badin hu melubash chesed gadol, because within the judgment is actually hidden, is enclosed a great kindness. Ki hu letovato, because it's for the person's benefit. Ve chesed ze melubash begvura, and this kindness is enclosed in stringency. Chad hu k'tiv, it's chada hu k'tiv, as it's written, v'zeu shekatuv, as it's written, begvurot yesha yemino. With gvura, with stringency, his salvation will come through his right hand. Let's see. Small docha v'yamin mekarev. So that's interesting. The left hand pushes away, yamin mekarev. The right hand pulls forward. So the right hand is connected here to gevura. Gevura is stringency. But the stringency is pulling a person closer, and that's where the salvation is coming from. Shebetoch hadinim ve'agvorot merubash yesha yemino. Within the judgments and stringencies is hidden the right hand is the person's salvation, meaning the stringency is the person's salvation. B'bchinat chesed. This is connected to kindness. Ki adin hazeh nimshach mechesed, because this judgment is drawn down from a place of kindness. And this is what it says, Ki gavar aleinu chasto, because he, how would I translate that? Well, the meaning is that the stringencies that come upon us are really chesed. Gavar aleinu chasto. V'gam kan nirmaz, and also here it's hinted at, shehagvurot heim chasadim be'emet, that the stringencies are actually coming from a place of kindness. Kedei sheyitkarev al yedei zeh yoter leHashem yitbarach. In order for a person to come through this closer to Hashem, v'namadnu me psukim elu, we learn from these three verses, gimol agderot zu lamala mizu. Each of these three definitions of yisurim shel ahava, of stringencies that come from a place of love, one higher than the next. So the first one, shehadin shelehem nolad mitoch chesed. The first is to know that when there's a judgment against you, it's coming from a place of kindness. The second, shebedin menumash chesed gadon ki yisurim heim letovato. The second is that within the judgment is enclosed a great kindness, because the afflictions that a person's suffering are for their benefit. Ukshemitbonen behem heim enam din ela rak chesed. When a person looks close at them, they'll realize that these judgments and afflictions that a person is suffering are not really afflictions, but they are actually kindness. Small-minded, yes. Small-minded is mochin de katnut, or I said constricted consciousness, the same thing. Shalom Aleichem to Yael. Af she'nitpe'er she'yisurim shel ahava heim chesed. We're only going to do a little bit more. Even though he said that the suffering that we suffer from a place of love is actually kindness, b'chol ofen im b'chinat mochim de katnut. Still, they come from a small-minded, constricted consciousness. There, I include them both. V'tzarich kol adam leilech mikatnut legadlut ulehamtik et adin akadosh hazeh. And every person has to go from constrictedness to expandedness in their thinking, in their understanding the afflictions that they're suffering, in order to sweeten the holy judgment against them. V'zeh she'amu, and this is what our sages of blessed memory said, she'yisurim shel ahava heim b'chinat mochin lekatnut shel elokim, that the afflictions of love come from a place of constricted consciousness of the name Elokim. Elokim, Hashem's name Elokim, is one of judgment. Ki Yitzchak hu b'chinat Elokim, because Yitzchak is connected to the name of God Elokim, and he's going to give us a proof in just a second. Shu b'chinat din, which is connected to judgment. K'moshe katuv, as it's written, Shamra Sarah she'nolad Yitzchak, Sarah that gave birth to Yitzchak, Tzchok asali Elokim. Hashem is making fun of me. Hashem is laughing at me. And you see, it says here, Tzchok and Elokim, that's the connection. Yitzchak nolad b'bchinat Shem Elokim. Yitzchak was born with an aspect of the name Elokim in him. Shehu ba mebchinat Sarah, that comes from the name, from the aspect or attribute of Sarah. Midat Malchut. Sarah means it's coming from a place of Malchut, of kingship, of sovereignty. Kamosha Peresh Rashi, as Rashi explained, Ki atam shenikra Sarah b'shem zeh. Why was Sarah called Sarah? Who is because Meshum she Sarah al kol haolam. Because Sarah was the Sarah, meaning the minister over the whole world, meaning she had the power over the whole world. הרי ששרה הייתה לה בבחינת ספירת מלכות. Sarah had within her the aspect of the sphera of malchut, which is the lowest and receives the energy from everything above, but it was also, in a sense, has the most potential because it receives so much from above, and that's how she was the queen of the whole world, in a sense. Umikoach zeh, and from this power, haytala she Sarah umalchut an kol haolam, and this is how she ruled over and was queen over the whole world. V'sfira zu hi dinim, and this attribute, this the sphera is connected to din, it's connected to judgment. Kamosha Amu Chazal, as Sage of Blessed Memory said in Gitin, Dina de Malchuta Dina. The judgment, the rule of the kingship is the rule of the land. Va'adin shel malchut gozeret. Tzarich lekayamo. Whatever the government or the kingship decrees, everybody has to keep. Nimtza, it follows, shvirat malchut, that the attribute of malchut, he b'chinat din, is connected to din. So basically what he's doing is he's just bringing text proofs to prove his point that when you're being judged and you're suffering, it's coming from a place of chesed, ultimately. V'ikar adin uksheyesh mochin dekatnut. And what's the big problem that we have with these judgments? We don't have the ability to see that Hashem is trying to help us. Now, I want to kind of finish here because I want to say a few things about Rav Shalom in a second. But what does it mean? Mochin dekatnut. So sometimes we merit to see why Hashem does things to us. We don't always merit to see it. A person, for example, could have an experience and make a lot of money, and then lose all the money. And they would say, why did Hashem do that to me? Why did Hashem let me make all this money and then make me lose all this money? And if the person eventually makes money again, they will understand that the reason that Hashem did that was to show them that they could make the money, but they had to do the work, and it was like kind of a flash. It was a gift. You can see that you can make it, but now you're going to have to work your way back to it. And when the person makes money again, they can look back and they can say, now I understand why Hashem did that to me. Why Hashem gave me, $20,000 and why I lost the $20,000. So when you make the $20,000, it's very easy to understand. Hashem gave me $20,000. But when you lose the $20,000 or you lose $40,000, you say, why did Hashem do that to me? This is where the mochin dekatnut comes in. So if a person decides to just look at it and say, Hashem wants to make me suffer. I'm suffering, then they won't have the expanded consciousness to see why. But if a person says, Hashem caused me to lose this money in order for me to see something, and eventually they see what Hashem wanted them to see, they can only see that with an expanded consciousness. And the expanded consciousness comes from being aware and able to look at your suffering from a different perspective and find out why Hashem would want you to suffer. And the answer is to overcome the suffering and then come closer to Hashem. So we're going to continue next week with Hashem. Koch, do you have any questions? You want to ask anything? Okay. So it's Reb Shalom's yard site tonight, and earlier at 7 o'clock I was speaking at the Brat's house. It's the 8th yard site. When Reb Shalom passed away, there were many hundreds of people at the funeral. And the first yard site event was packed, but of course, you can't keep these schemes going year after year. So there were some people at the Brat's house, there were some people watching online, but I never expect them to last for very long. And it's fine, that's the way it's supposed to be. The leaves on the ground are covered by new leaves, and we step on those leaves. And that's how the world is supposed to work. But I'll just share a couple things that I said at the event. So the first was, what were some of the things that Reb Shalom and I discussed that I thought maybe people wouldn't know. And the number one thing with Reb Shalom was being humble. I don't know about him personally. I don't know if he really had to work on it, but I had to work on being more humble. Definitely had to work on it. And he would push me very hard to, the way you break your ego is you want to do something and you don't do that thing. So for example, you want to buy a red sports car, you buy a more modest car. You want to sit in the front of the shul, you sit in the back of the shul. You want to tell people, I did that and I did this, you just don't say what you did. You know what you did, but you don't have to tell everybody what you did. So that's the path of humility. The second thing was growing spiritually. And he had a thing where he talked many times about doing this very long Shemona Esrei, saying each word for 5 or 7 or 10 seconds. And he was very scared of doing it. And I remember me doing it many times and saying to him, it was an awesome spiritual experience and you should try it. But it wasn't something that he really wanted to do. He was scared that he wouldn't come back from it. And I can understand, the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the Farbrengens, you can see that he's holding a handkerchief. He's sitting and speaking, but under the table, sometimes it comes on top of the table, he's holding a handkerchief. And the reason apparently was, sorry, to keep himself grounded in this world. You can get to spiritual places where you get lost. We actually had a Shabbos guest that happened to him, that he decided to get into some very deep Kabbalah and kind of lost his mind. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. But I saw it with my own eyes. It's a guy that I knew for many years. Eventually he had to leave. He went back to the States. His parents came and picked him up. He would literally sit at the Shabbos meal and drool. It was like he was on, he had, what's it called? When you have part of your brain taken out.
Lobotomy.
Lobotomy. It was like he had a lobotomy, but he didn't have any surgery. He got too deep into spiritual stuff that he didn't have the kelim for. He didn't have the vessels for. There's another guy I knew who did the same thing with the same teacher and ended up dying. And when I visited him in the hospital, he said to me, I know I'm here because I went to places that I wasn't supposed to go spiritually. So I've never been in those places. I was close to one time, and I can just share that with you. There was a teacher that since passed away. He was from the 80s, but I learned about him, and I found a couple of lessons of his, and I started trying to do these meditations that he was teaching. And he talked about going upstairs into an attic and closing the door and being there with Hashem. So I would daven Shemona Esrei, and I worked on meditating, going into this place and closing the door. And I found myself in total bliss, not wanting to come out of the meditation, not wanting to come out of the davening, and really not wanting to come back into this world at all. And when I did, I realized that wasn't healthy. That's not healthy davening, so I stopped doing it at all. So anyhow, shalom for, maybe he did it secretly, I don't know. But he did talk about going into these high places, but also doing it in a safe way. And another thing that I mentioned is that, I think I probably mentioned it here. There's a guy in the shul that I daven in for mincha, and he was making everybody crazy. He was leading the davening, making everyone crazy, and people were leaving the shul. This is already after Shalom passed away. So I asked my inner Shalom, what am I supposed to do? Should I leave the shul with everybody else? What am I supposed to do with this guy? So my inner Shalom said to me, you need to love him more. And of course, loving a person more comes from a Zamra, lesson Reish Pei Bet, 282, where you look at the good points in the person and everything. So after 6 months, I was able to judge the person positively, but still people were leaving the shul. So again, I asked my inner Shalom, what am I supposed to do? And he says, now you're supposed to lead the davening. So I go to the rabbi, and I tell him, listen, people are leaving the shul, and the rabbi says, so you'll lead the davening. But I didn't want to lead the davening because I lead a lot of davening. I want to take a break on Shabbos Mincha. But I ended up leading the davening, and even though Shalom is not physically in this world, for me, he's still very present, and his neshama shehaven aliyah in Gan Eden. Shalom ben Yosef Yukazil Zusha Bezat Hashem. Shkoyach to everybody for watching. We'll play a little nigun and continue again next week. Bezat Hashem. Let's see what are we going to play. To everyone for watching. Can't turn it off because it says slow connection.